Hi everyone, welcome. My name is Kathy and I'm a PhD student at USC and also the current Vice President of BCLA. I hope you all enjoyed our breakout sessions and had some fruitful and thought-provoking discussions with our mentors. The COVID-19 pandemic has really put a spotlight on the biotech industry in an unprecedented way. Never before have we pushed drug discovery and vaccine development at this rate. And it can be said that the pandemic has served as a biotech accelerator. And LA-based companies have really risen to this challenge. So we're excited to present to you a fireside chat with nationally and internationally renowned innovation executive, Dr. Susan Wynden Bannister. Susan was recognized by the Boston Globe as one of the top 10 most influential women in biotech, and we're so pleased to have her with us today. This will be followed by our second panel discussion of the day. Today's panel aims to bring together local innovators to share how the LA biotech ecosystem has supported their success, and also highlight its deficiencies and discuss how we can ensure continuous growth. Our moderator today is Dave Wynden, CEO of Bioscience LA. Having spent over 20 years in LA, he's an expert on the vibrant biotech industry in the city. Before we begin, I'd like to quickly thank our sponsors for their continued support and also for making this event possible. And with that, I'll hand it over to you, Dave.
Perfect. Thank you so much for having us, Kathy. Really appreciate it. Very excited to be here and excited to be here with you for the next hour or so. And very, very honored to have Sue Wynden Bannister here with me to kind of kick things off. As Kathy mentioned, Sue is I'm going to say a giant in the industry as the founding CEO, president and CEO of Massachusetts Life Sciences Initiative, but more recently as a world-renowned consultant with biomedical growth strategies. And full disclaimer, Sue is also the board chair of Bioscience LA, which I think means she's my boss. So I'm going to try to, we'll try not to be too rough on each other here, but super, super excited to have this conversation today. And Sue, would love just to have you kick things off a little bit by, I know you've lived all over the country. You ended up in Massachusetts for school, made a great career there, and now you're in LA. And we'll just hear a little bit about that travel across the country.
Listen, it's such a pleasure to be here. Thank you. And thank you for the kind words, Dave. And yes, it's very wise to be nice to your board chair. So I'll take all of that with a grain of salt, but thank you. Yes, I'm a transplant from Boston for a couple of reasons. Obviously the weather, and I think we don't need to really go into that. That's pretty obvious. But in my journeys around the country and really around the world, working to help different geographies transform themselves into innovation hubs, I see so many of the right ingredients in greater Los Angeles. And so not only was I interested in finding a warmer climate to live, but I was really interested in looking for a place that I thought had the beginnings of the DNA and had the will and the interest. And it's just been great just to really be a part of that process.
Got it. So love that phrase DNA, and maybe just teeing on that, would love to get a sense of, sort of what did you see in the DNA in Boston, over the past 20 years, and then what elements of that same DNA are here in Los Angeles?
So I have to say that many people think that all of the ingredients were in Boston when we made this leap. But the truth of the matter is there were really very few of the elements, and there really wasn't a lot of entrepreneurial DNA. We had a fairly conservative environment, and risk-taking was rather frowned upon, and we were losing a lot of our entrepreneurs to California. So a big part of it for us was really creating the conditions that enabled entrepreneurs to be successful. That included really trying to transform the academic culture so that they saw themselves, the universities and the research centers, as being more engaged and being a source of startup activity and spin out activity. Certainly making capital available, risk capital for young companies. Thinking about the talent pool. Companies ultimately need not just good research talent, they need operating talent, infrastructure, Are there places for young companies to grow and then to move on as they grow? And I think most importantly, the secret sauce was really investing in building an ecosystem. And I think that's what really created that DNA, that collaborative DNA, where everyone sees themselves now as part of this network. And the resources are shared, they're leveraged, people have come out of their silos. And I see a lot of that interest in moving in that direction in greater Los Angeles. So I see the roots of that DNA.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've been here in Los Angeles for 20 years and have seen a lot of this evolving over that time. And I'm excited for our panel a little bit, because I think each of them has come to LA with a similar sense of what's already here, what can we build on top of that, and how can we move it forward. One other thought, just about, in sort of from a parallel standpoint. So when you were really doing this early work with Massachusetts Life Sciences Initiative, that was, I would say, back in the last Great Recession, if you will, sort of the economic collapse was happening. We now find ourselves here, not just in LA, but across the country and around the world, in this healthcare crisis, which has led to an economic crisis, which has now been exacerbated by social crises. And would love your thoughts on sort of what worked, special or just generally in that time in Massachusetts, and how we can think about that kind of as we get a new start in this new decade here in LA.
Thanks. And, Kathy began to touch on it when she talked about all eyes being on the life sciences right now during this pandemic. What I should have mentioned, and it ties into this when you asked about the conditions in Massachusetts and that I see here in LA, is a leader, someone who's willing to step forward and be very intentional about coalescing and bringing the resources to bear. So what I think was unique in Massachusetts at that time was, as you said, we were deep in this recession, and we really needed to invest in a very intentional and aggressive way in an industry, or if you will, industry sectors that could help pull us out of that recession. The main industries in Massachusetts were financial services, healthcare, education. They were all struggling. And we placed a big bet on the life sciences. There was a lot of good about that in terms of this being a very mission-driven set of sectors. But also, these are sectors that as young companies grow and commercialize, you see that hockey stick effect. There's a lot of hiring. There is hiring of people with all different types of skill sets, ranging from less than a bachelor's degree, maybe just a high school certificate, of course, all the way through our PhDs and postdocs. There's a lot of economic development that's driven by the industry through the investment of companies, not just job creation. Following then the investment by real estate developers who start thinking about commercial lab space and maybe incubating and co-working spaces. So a lot of capital projects that come to bear. So this was a big bet. It has become a $1.5 billion bet that Massachusetts has made. But I will say very quickly, kind of 4 lessons that came out of our work in Massachusetts. One is that accelerating innovation is not a one-note endeavor. It really does take a portfolio of activities, because innovation has a life cycle and it needs support across that life cycle. So secondly, you really do need a strategy that pulls all the pieces together and coordinates how investments are being made. Thirdly, just recognizing the importance of enabling startup companies to move forward. That attracts capital, it attracts talent, it attracts larger companies who want to swim in a pool with a lot of minnows, if you will. And last but not least, I think the secret sauce is the ecosystem. It's really what Bioscience LA has been created to do. And that is to try and get everyone out of their silos, to coordinate resources, to leverage those resources, and to improve the accessibility across the community so that you really do have a well coalesced ecosystem.
Yeah, that's terrific. I think there's some really great lessons that we can think about that I'm thinking about with for Bioscience LA, but also, you know, as we've had these conversations with entrepreneurs like we're going to talk to in a few minutes, as well as others in the greater LA region, there's a real opportunity to bring some of those ideas together, bring that energy together, as you said, you know, have people get out of their silos, which I think it's one of the silver linings of the of 2020 for many of us, is that while we're not out there, you know, physically out of our silos, having this virtual connectivity like we're doing right now, like we've been doing so much, really is connecting people in a way where I think there's the opportunity to do more across the LA region, do more across these various, you know, how do we connect biotech to medtech to digital health in ways that can really make some unique new innovations here in Los Angeles? How do we connect those to some of the other industries that are here as well? So I think there's a real exciting opportunity, and I think if I'm, you know, looking to sort of what you and the group made happen in Massachusetts, looking at, you and I spent time in New York doing some similar work, how we can really build our own flavor, build our own answer here in Los Angeles that takes some of the best practices, the learnings from what we've done in other parts of the country and world, but do it in a way that is uniquely Los Angeles.
I really agree with you, Dave, and I really want to emphasize, I think, the great point you made. We've all now had good practice during the pandemic of working together, but doing so virtually. And my real hope is that that will overcome some of some of what I hear so often, which is that the geography of Greater Los Angeles works against the creation of an ecosystem or ecosystems other than very small localized ecosystems. So new tools, I think a lot of practice and working together collaboratively and reaching, and I think that's going to really help us as we push forward.
Got it. One of the other topics that you and I have been talking about a lot recently, and we made some, you know, some major announcements with LA County recently, are around workforce development, job creation, internships, both from at a macro level or sort of you know, industry-wide level, as well as really focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion, how we can start to build a more diverse and vibrant workforce here in LA, which hopefully will lead to some new innovation, ultimately lead to growth. And would love just to get your thoughts on sort of some of what you've done in the past, certainly in Massachusetts, and how we can apply that here in LA to really grow the talent side of the equation.
Well, you know, I think we realize that if we're going to grow the industry, we have to grow the talent from which industry can draw. We recognized also the importance of a diverse workforce, not just because there is growth among people of color in the U.S. population, and we are very underrepresented, being a person of color, in the life sciences. So really starting way upstream, really thinking about how do we get girls and kids of color interested in STEM careers. How do we better enable the schools to teach STEM? So investing in curriculum development and labs and equipment, supporting community-based programs that encourage kids, maker spaces, just encourage kids to think about careers in the life sciences. Then we funded a lot of internships. By the time I left the Life Sciences Center, we had funded about 4,000 internships, most of those going to startup companies. So we were building a culture and an appetite for entrepreneurship. At the same time, we were providing low or no cost resources for startup companies. And then last but not least, we really invested in programs in Massachusetts, in the Boston area, that support women and other diverse workers of color who are in the field and really building leadership skills and focusing on building more inclusive workforces. So we took a very, very comprehensive approach, which is you start building the pipeline, you create the pathways into the industry, and then you support professionals once they're in industry. Certainly LA has a head start because there is a very diverse population here already.
Yeah, I think that's one of the real hidden strengths. You know, it's not a secret, but I think it's a hidden strength, especially in this industry. And as we think about coming out of this current set of crises that we're in, building for the future, and looking to what is the future of biotech life sciences in LA, in particular around some emerging areas like biomanufacturing that Llewellyn, who'll be on shortly, he and I have talked about. We start to think about what do we need for this industry to thrive 5, 10, 20 years from now. And, in particular, as you get to that outside number, who's going to be staffing these companies in 20 years, whether they are the researchers or the lab techs or the, operators or maintenance people. And, whoever those are our kindergartners right now that we need to be thinking about. How do we reach them? How do we give them a sense of what is life sciences? What is this industry? What are the opportunities? And how do you start to build a path that gets there? And I think this is a place where LA really can thrive because, as you said, we have this amazing diverse population and incredibly large population base where we can start to build a really amazing infrastructure foundation for future growth through the people here.
I really agree with you. The life sciences is a big tent, and people don't necessarily realize that. But when you look at the net new job creation in Massachusetts, only about a quarter of those new jobs have gone to PhDs and postdocs. Almost half have gone to workers with a BA, and a quarter have gone to workers with a high school degree or less. So there's a good story there about this really being an industry that needs and draws on many different types of talent and skill sets.
Perfect. I think that's something that we'll talk to Llewellyn, Basel, and in particular the two of them in a moment. And I know they've got some great thoughts around that. I'm not going to steal their thunder, but I think it's probably about time for us to bring the panel together. I just wanted to give you a chance to any sort of, before we get this group together, sort of parting words, thoughts around sort of what have we done so far in LA that you've seen, and then what's next.
As I look at life sciences initiatives and those that have been successful and those that have been less successful, what LA has done that's really smart is to create an entity like Bioscience LA, an independent entity whose sole mission is to coordinate, invest in, and support the ecosystem. As I said, the ecosystem is the secret sauce. That's where the leverage comes from. I like to say 1 + 1 = 11. Entrepreneurs need an ecosystem. Large companies want to be connected well through an ecosystem. VCs love to see a strong ecosystem. So I think that that's been a very smart move, and the recognition that there's a need to really coordinate and leverage all the resources. So I'm excited to be here, and I'm excited to be part of Bioscience LA.
Perfect. Well, likewise. We could not do it without your support. So we're lucky to have you in LA, and thrilled to take a pause here for a moment. We'll be back momentarily with our panel. And Sue, I'm glad you can stick with us, and we're going to have a great dialogue around sort of what's happening in LA, what's next, and I think everything we just talked about is really going to be a great prelude to that. So
thanks, Dave.
Tuned.
Thank you so much. What a fascinating fireside chat. So let's move on to our panel discussion. Today we have on our panel Dave Wynden as our moderator, Llewellyn Cox, Basil, Joe, and Susan. And I'm going to hand it over to you again, Dave.
Perfect. So thank you. And this is going to be a great continuation of what Sue and I were just chatting about, really talking about innovation in life sciences here in LA. And wanted to start with there's a passage about LA that I love from a crime writer that I had admittedly never read, but I love the quote. So bear with me. Los Angeles was the kind of place where everybody was from somewhere else and nobody really dropped anchor. It was a transient place. People were drawn by the dream. People were running from the nightmare. 12 million people, and all of them ready to make a break for it if necessary. Figuratively, literally, metaphorically, any way you want to look at it, everybody in LA keeps a bag packed just in case. And what I love about this panel is that all of us are from somewhere else, but for various reasons, all of us have dropped anchor here. And that anchor really is life sciences, which is, I think, just so exciting. And so want to dig into that. And what I also really love about this group is that I have had conversations about LA, what we've got, where we're going with everyone on the panel multiple times over the years, some like Llewellyn going back many, many years. And so really excited to have all of us here. And so want to kick off just by having everyone, and we will end with Sue, since hopefully most of you have just seen Sue and I chatting, but want to have everyone introduce themselves and give me a sense of, or, who you are, what you're doing right now, and then your own little LA story, how you got here. And let's start with Basel, since I think you've been here for the longest.
That's faint praise. Yes, I've been in LA since 1992, when I started graduate school at Caltech in chemistry, and I worked there in protein engineering and protein design, and that led to the spin out from Caltech of the company where I still work, Xencor, in 1997. And so our story was one of wanting to create a company that could exploit what we thought was really exciting technology we developed at Caltech, and really discovering pretty early on in that journey, and having that discovery reinforced year after year after year, that you're constantly going to have to reinvent what it is you're offering. You're constantly going to have to reinvent the definition of cutting edge technology so your company can keep abreast of this incredibly rapidly moving field of life sciences. And I can tell you, absolutely, it's moving a lot faster in 2020 than it was in 1997. So that constant reinvention, I think, is a really great link to where LA is right now as a life sciences location. It has really turned a corner in the last 5 or 6 years, with starting to see that coalescence of critical mass of people, of capital from sophisticated pools of capital, both local in LA and coming into LA, and attention from large companies in our ecosystem that are starting to pay attention. I think those are the pieces. We're still early, but I see that reinvention happening really as we speak.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. And Llewellyn, I know you've followed kind of a similar path from an academic standpoint, and would love to hear your story. Where are you from? You've got an accent. What brings you to LA, and talk a little bit about what you're doing today.
Sure. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me join you, Biotech Connection. And yeah, I'm from far away. I'm from England originally, and I came to the States originally to do some postdoc research at Weill Cornell Medical School in New York City. And so I guess I'm one of those washed up souls that Dave's talking about, because I got 6 years into postdoc, and academically things were going pretty well, but I realized that this was not a lifestyle or a career that I wanted in any way whatsoever. And having only been trained to do that one thing, I was kind of looking for something else to do. So I quite openly followed my immensely more talented wife, who is a fashion designer, to Los Angeles, where she got a job at BCBG. So I followed her out here and started to kind of explore. And long story short, I got into the world of entrepreneurship, and kind of my story now intersects with that of Biotech Connection. Because 6 years ago, I started a company called Lab Launch. We realized as local entrepreneurs that one of these factors that was really causing the brain drain of all these great teams and technologies away from Los Angeles to other cities was the lack of affordable, high quality lab space to start a company. And so, we started originally as a nonprofit. We've since converted to being a regular for-profit company, and created a small incubator out in Monrovia that's now served over 30 companies. We've only had one failure in 5 years, so I think we're doing pretty okay out there. And simultaneously, I met these two wonderful, driven young women, Katrina and Chloe, who were both UCLA, I think, students at the time. One of them might have been a postdoc at that point. And they brought this idea of Biotech Connection and said, we think this is something that would be really important and really valuable. And so we kind of co-launched together at the first, Biotech Summit that BCLA put together. And it's really exciting now, 6 years later, to be there. And I guess kind of the final part to this puzzle is it wouldn't be a BCLA Summit if I didn't announce a new company. I'm also now working as a venture capitalist with a firm called Mars Bio. We're a LA-based early stage venture capitalist company. And what's really exciting about that is we are the manager of the Los Angeles County Bioscience Investment Fund. So along with their investments in Bioscience LA and all the work that I'm sure you guys are going to do fantastically, Dave and Susan, and investing in real estate at the new LA Biospace Incubator and the Lundquist Institute down in Torrance. The third stool of LA's large push into bioscience is to spur venture activity. And so the County of Los Angeles has basically put up $15 million that we need to match 2 to 1 to invest in early stage innovative bioscience companies. And we're very proud to be the manager of that fund and investing in startups across Los Angeles.
Perfect. No, very, very exciting. Awesome story, and really excited, Llewellyn, about the most recent one as well. I think there's a lot of good that can come of that, and we'll come back to funding in a moment. I want to get Joe Bhakti on, and Joe is dialed in over the phone right now. And I actually, I sort of, before I met Joe, I knew who he was because I became acquainted with Quantgene at some point a year plus ago, and was very excited to hear about a life sciences health tech company that had moved from the Bay Area to Los Angeles. And I said, I really need to meet this guy, Joe. And so I was thrilled to actually meet him for the first time in person earlier this year. And I've had the privilege of having some amazing dinners at the Quantgene offices. And I know that all of that sounds crazy, because who goes to public places and offices to have dinners with people that they don't know? And we'll be doing that kind of thing again in the future. So with that, Joe, would love to hear a little bit of your story, how you've gotten here, and a bit more about Quantgene.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great to be here with you guys. And yeah, Dave, I think, these are crazy stories to our grandchildren, that back in the day you could just meet for dinner and no one is going to believe it. But that's how it was in the beginning of 2020. I remember that too. So yeah, I mean, Quantgene, we founded the company in 2015 up at UC Berkeley. And what Quantgene is, I think, is something that represents this new age of medicine. We are at the intersection of deep biotechnology, cloud, and AI. And these are not just buzzwords, but these are all very necessary components for us to pull something together where we combine the next level of genetic testing with liquid biopsy, cell-free DNA, profiling in the blood, mostly for cancer detection, but also other diseases, and then tie it into a cloud system that creates a 360-degree insight into your medical records. And these 3 data layers together, conventional medical records and family history with hereditary genetics and liquid biopsy, gives us a tremendously deeper understanding of a patient that leads directly into very hard, measurable medical advantages, such as early disease detection, driving down cancer mortality dramatically in the population that uses that. So it's a very futuristic approach that is backed by very hard, concrete scientific components and engineering components that span these very different fields that are now converging. And that makes us, that puts us at this innovation frontier of precision medicine. And there was a reason where we started in Berkeley. There was very good access to certain, diagnostics and scientific research tools. but there's also a reason why we very deliberately, moved down here to LA after Series A and another convertible note we raised. So now we are going towards the Series B and towards commercialization of that new system. And what we saw is that you need a market, you need kind of an ecosystem that is open to innovation and not too old school how you go about things, especially when you merge three very different silos together into a new thing. And the Bay Area has this, image of being the innovators and this amazing thing. And what we found is, it's growing old a little bit. You have a lot of very conventional thinkers. They think, okay, you're biotech and you're cloud and you're AI, and that's not very good. And so when we, looked into different ecosystems, we liked LA a lot from the talent side of things, from the investor side of things. I get to this in a second, but maybe most importantly from a, market perspective. So in LA, we have this tremendous, medical awareness about, life extension and health, both in the medical community and in the consumer ecosystem, where we believe that LA has the most forward-thinking consumers in terms of healthcare and longevity and, cutting-edge medicine, which is very important when you launch a product like that. So we were very clear after doing our homework and comparing multiple, areas like San Diego, Boston, New York, San Francisco, LA, that LA is the place to go. We think it's the future, and here you can innovate really across borders and industries. And we also like the investor ecosystem. I think it's like Silicon Valley 20 years ago, maybe. So you still have that sense of community. Mars Bio is a great example. It's a small fund, but smart guys, and I come across them continuously. And I just was on a panel with Joe on Tuesday, and I had a good conversation with Ari before. So, you're right, and Upfront Ventures, of course. So it's still like more like a family setting in LA, which I think is very conducive to doing really innovative stuff together, because you need to have that, I think, personal connection and, run across people's paths multiple times. That's how real innovation can happen. And that's very hard in Silicon Valley, for example, where everything is like more industrialized on that side. So we are big LA fans. Dave was, of course, always super helpful and is a great connector here. So thanks, Dave, for doing all the great work. And we are super excited, still even more bullish than ever on the Los Angeles ecosystem.
Perfect. That's terrific, and glad the energy is still there. Lots more great stuff to come. Sue, you are the newest Angelino, and so I know most people have probably just heard us chatting, but for those who've come in late, maybe you could just give a quick snapshot of St. Louis to Boston to Southern California. Tell us your story a bit.
So you're right. I came, my suitcases are unpacked and they will not be repacked to leave this area. But for so many of the things that all of you were talking about, and for me, as someone who's lived my entire life and my career in the life sciences innovation spaces, this was just a very, very attractive place to be. Immediately before coming, I was for about 7 years the founding CEO of Massachusetts initiative to convert itself from an academic research hub to a true life sciences innovation hub, and sort of putting in place so many of the things that all of you have talked about: the talent, funds, infrastructure, and that all talent and that all important ecosystem. So it's great to be here and to listen and to learn and to share ideas about how we did it in Massachusetts, but obviously this will be what it needs to be done and how it needs to be done here in Greater Los Angeles.
Perfect. Thank you all. And I think you've each hit on a number of the themes about what we've got here in LA, kind of this infrastructure, this scaffolding to help build the industry on top of it. I sometimes think of these things in some broad buckets or levers where we have the ability to impact as Bioscience LA or as other community members, simply funding, space, and talent. And there's a number of other factors, but I think those three in particular are really what can help drive growth. And so I think each of you have addressed a couple of those already. Want to go back to funding for a moment, and we'll get to Llewellyn and Mars Bio, but Basel, would love to start with you and just you've started a company here coming out of Caltech. You've raised capital, most of it I think not from here, and now you've got a publicly held company that is still here in LA. Would love to get your thoughts on sort of how that funding ecosystem has changed here in LA, and what are the opportunities for startups and growing companies to raise capital, whether it's here already or money from elsewhere writing checks into LA.
So there wasn't really any kind of funding or venture capital ecosystem for life sciences in the late 1990s when we started Xencor. And truth be told, the infrastructure around the country was a fraction of what it is today, right? So it was just a different place, but LA was non-existent. And I would say, even if you dialed forward a decade from there, say to the late 2000s, about 12, 13 years ago, there was very, very little in LA, right? So I think that, for us, the money came from wherever we could find it. Caltech, which is another one of the strengths of this region, is the wonderful universities, was a draw, a magnet for people who were bringing money from the outside. And I think that credibility helps a lot of startups in the LA area. The downside is a lot of times they run off and relocate to where the money is, right? We didn't do that for really a million reasons and none. And I think now when I look at the ecosystem in LA, it is vastly different. You have, as I said before, a number of sophisticated, well-funded firms that are bringing capital into this region, like Westlake Village Partners, like Vita Ventures. There's mid-sized funds that are local of origin, like Upfront was mentioned. And then there's a number of small funds, just nascent ones getting started. And I bet you a few of those are going to end up being pretty big funds in 5 or 10 years. And so those are the pieces that help deals get sourced and interlinked with other money and set up for their next level of financing. So I think that we're still going to remain dependent on external money, but I don't think that's unique for any region. Even Boston, with a massive VC infrastructure, people are investing from San Francisco, right? Or Shanghai, right? Or New York. So I think we need to leverage this trend that's being accelerated by the COVID-19 pandemic of delocalizing some of these interactions. I think that's going to have pretty profound implications for LA, because we have a lot more to gain from delocalizing in life sciences than we have to lose. So I would say we shouldn't lose sight of that. I think the one negative is that when you're the new kid on the block, making that first set of connections and networking that'll allow you to facilitate for you these kind of remote interactions, that's a lot harder to do in this remote connection world. There's not a lot of the pressing of the flesh and chasing people down at a reception and pulling on their elbow to get them to say hi to you. So I think LA as a region has that still, not just in the individual small companies. So we've got a little work to do, but I think the pieces are there. And BioLA is going to help, and the folks on this panel getting out there and vocalizing that we're here is going to help.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think your point about the delocalization and the globalization of investment and venture capital is a really important one. And I think the idea is we would love to see, we want to build a great ecosystem here in LA. We don't do that in a vacuum. And so part of that is how do we get capital from other places? Part of it is how do we start having smarter investors here who are making investments both here and other places. And ultimately we have a very steady flow of good services, capital, people, coming in and out over time. And so, we're starting to build a bit of that structure. Llewellyn, you've raised capital here in LA for ventures. You are now, funding companies here in LA. Would love your thoughts on kind of how that's evolved over the past several years.
Yeah, I think as people have said over and over already in this, it's night and day. Where we were 5 years ago when we were just starting up as an incubator company, there was not a lot of stuff to do here, especially outside of really well understood business models. And I think that's a key. But today, you know, as Basil said, he just read off a list of VCs of various sizes, and that's very important as well. You know, we at Mars Bio are coming in at that very, very early stage, that seed capital, that first check that you need. And that's obviously a key part of the ecosystem. But just that alone is not enough, because that company needs to grow and then get further investment. And so, you know, obviously, you know, they're part of that job to make those relationships. But, you know, those firms really need to be located in the area. And that's what we've been seeing with this growth of both homegrown capital and influx of capital. And I don't think it can be underrated just how many people are moving south from San Francisco in the investment space right now. It's been an open secret for 3 or 4 years that most of the major firms up there have an office here. And most of them, even more, have a second home here. And now they're making it their first home. That's, you know, we've seen, you know, really big names such as Peter Thiel moving down here. You know, that's some significant capital. And yeah, I just kind of want to agree with the point that, you know, Basil and Dave both made. You know, at the end of the day, venture capitalists, you know, we might be based in Boston or Los Angeles, but our fund is, you know, funded by limited partners who could literally be anywhere from all over the world with certain restrictions, because, you know, you can't take money from certain people. But maybe we should try that. Let's do something really innovative here. We'll have the North Korean investment biotech fund. I joke, this is not on the record. But seriously, you know, I mean, we had investors from Mexico, from New York, from Boston in our fund. You know, these people are all putting money into a fund that explicitly looks at Los Angeles and says, there's value here, there's talent here, and if we invest in it, we can all benefit here. And I think that's really where we are now. And, you know, we're on a journey, and we have a clear vector of direction now. And I think that's what's really different from 5 years ago. We're a work in progress, but things are really headed in a very strong direction.
Can I just comment quickly on what Basil and Llewellyn have said, Dave?
Yeah, please.
Just in the spirit of a dialogue, I just really want to agree with what they're saying about the fact that capital is mobile, and really a metric of how well we're doing is how well we're competing for a share of the venture dollar, and that a lot of that is going to come from outside the area. And as I think the investors see really promising companies here, they see the talent, they see that we've got the infrastructure, all the pieces are here, then we become more and more attractive to capital. And I think importantly, we become a place where companies not just start, but they can scale. So we don't lose entrepreneurs who are going elsewhere. Often it's not for capital. You know, often they're going where they can find better venture mentoring. They're going, you know, to where they can find operating talent. They're going to where they can find the right kind of infrastructure, meaning, you know, commercial lab space, co-working space, whatever. And so what I think is really great about what's happening right now is that in addition to the funds, we're putting the pieces in place that make the companies that are being invested in want to stay in this area. And that's really great.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. If I can jump in here, I think, you know, something, I totally agree that that capital is kind of delocalized. It's kind of, there's tons of capital in the world, and it's not, you know, many people can raise large funds. I think that's not the thing that is actually needed. I think the secret that I saw in Silicon Valley, for example, I think that's the best not kept secret is, you know, we always focus on the entrepreneurs, which is, they are of course the most important one, but there's something that I call the entrepreneurial investor, and they are exponentially more important early stage. So I would say everything pre-Series B as early stage, that is where it's extremely important for building an ecosystem to have that entrepreneurial investor also be part of that. And with that, I mean, not someone who sits in a fund and gets pitched and says, okay, where's your revenue, where's your growth, where's your profit? But, people who sit down and say, you know what, I really like your vision. I think you're operating in a very hot space. I think you do some things very well. I think some things are, not enough for us to invest, but we are happy to, be there for you and guide you a little bit through that and see if you can get there.
Yeah.
And we can also connect you to a bunch of people who might be, able to help you.
Right.
And obviously that's much more important at seed stage and pre-Series A, but it's still important all the way to, Series B, I think. These types of people who are not just sitting there leaning back and say, okay, come back when I can print money with you, easily with no risk, but people who are, genuinely interested in transforming the world and building something together with the entrepreneurs, they are the most, one of the most important part of the ecosystem. And that's
agree.
what
The venture mentoring. Yes.
Right. It's venture mentoring. And I think in the end, it boils down to investors who are also entrepreneurs at heart, even if they can't maybe be in the first row, but who are genuinely interested in building innovation. And, that is tremendously important. And that's what I see more and more in LA, that you can have these conversations and people have good ideas and they are genuinely interested in the company and even give advice and support before they can invest. And so I think building that capability and attracting that type of talent, that kind of entrepreneurial capital talent, often these are entrepreneurs who just made it big and then start to invest or raise funds. Mars Bio is a great example. I think that is super important. That's the most important thing of, deploying capital intelligently.
Yeah. No, I think that's terrific. And one of the other things actually that Llewellyn and I have talked quite a bit about is that there's also, there is a tremendous amount of untapped private capital in the LA region. And, part of the challenge and opportunity there is educating those investors on what the opportunities are in life sciences. And, this is different from a film deal or different from a typical, a real estate deal or even a, typical tech deal, but helping them understand what some of these opportunities are and bringing them into the mix. And I know that, Mars Bio has done some of that. And I think that's something where Bioscience LA and the community can really help to grow that investor base. And so I think we'll come back to a couple of these enablers as well. But one thing I definitely want to touch on, because I know it's on everyone's minds. It was part of a number of the questions we received is, for those of you in operating businesses, Basil, Llewellyn, and Joe, each of you, I think, has really had the opportunity to spring into action around COVID innovation and response in some very different ways, from very different parts of the market. And so would love to, hear a little bit about just, what you're doing there, but also, what can we take from that becomes sort of a platform for a new product line, a new business, a new way of doing business going forward. And maybe Basil, we can start with you. I think yours might be the most straightforward, at least to my outsider. It's not straightforward once you're in there, I know, but would love to hear a little bit about the antibody side of the COVID world.
So we're a company that engineers monoclonal antibodies to make them into better drugs. And so we both build antibody drugs and we also create components of those drugs that can be used in a variety of ways. And that's, in fact, one of the marketed products that uses our technology is just that. We never actually made the drug molecule. It's a molecule called Ultomiris, sold by Alexion for a variety of rare inflammatory disorders. We remade a component of it that makes it last a lot longer. So they can, one shot will cover you and protect you for a lot longer. That technology is very important when you think about using an antibody therapy to prevent COVID infections from getting more severe, or even potentially to prophylax a person from developing an infection if they're exposed, much like the now very famous Regeneron drug. We've allowed, and we set up early on when COVID hit, a very rapid response licensing model for people that knew they wanted to get our technology into their drug candidate, which might not be worth anything ever, where they're blasting it forward and seeing where they're going to land in this landscape. We said, we want to make it easy. We want to make it painless. We want to make it so that it's out there. If you win and that drug wins, we'll win too, but we're not going to create any impediments along the way, whether that's, front end loaded cash payments to us or things like that. So that's how we responded. And I think collaboration is the model that's really going to be a lesson that I hope our industry learns from in the future coming out of COVID. I'm personally skeptical that it will. I think that the exigencies of the current situation are such that people are feeling forced to cooperate because of speed. I'm skeptical that that's a model that's going to remain. However, collaboration is what makes sense. We could be building our own COVID antibodies and COVID drugs. I think we'd just be a little bit slower than collaborating with others and applying our piece where it makes sense. So that's how we're operating. And I don't know what's going to flow out of this in terms of how people work. I know the FDA is being very flexible now, not just in the obvious ways with COVID drugs, but hey, if you've got a clinical trial where the data capture is being disrupted because patients aren't willing to come in or, whatever, we'll make it easier for you to clean that up than we would normally. We'll see how that plays out in the future. There's a lot of talk about intrinsic regulatory reform. I'm skeptical, but let's see.
Perfect. Thank you. That's terrific. Joe, you've had a really interesting story, I think, around QuantGene springing into action, I think, in not only a creative way, but I think you're showing a real sense of discipline and process in the middle of chaos, and would love to have you share a bit about that.
That's a very good summary, yes. So as I mentioned before, we do cancer detection and genetics, have very complex biotechnology that we deploy, but we merge that with cloud and AI components to achieve certain things that you cannot achieve without it. And when COVID hit and we saw the chaos and the testing delays, and we understood how simple this COVID test is compared to other things we're doing, we were first a little stunned and stood by for a month and thought, well, someone is going to fix it. It's not very hard to fix, but then we saw it's not getting fixed, it's getting worse. So longer turnaround times, false positives, all these things. And so we basically assigned, our team to the problem. We looked at PCR testing, real-time PCR testing for viral RNA, and basically debugged with a bunch of laboratories we work with here. What is the problem? Like what gets stuck here? And we saw everything from sample accession and manual inputs into computers, and then manual reporting and all kinds of things. And so what we did is we developed this cloud-based system that is vertically integrated just for COVID and horizontally integrated. So everything from patient identification, sample collection, barcoding of tubes, automated intake of the tubes and samples in the lab, and then automatic plate generation, and automated live reporting with AI components that recognize your results on the PCR machine, everything completely cloud connected. And we were able to basically cut out all human interaction on the data flow side, which is the central bottleneck for broad scale PCR testing for COVID. And so that, now we are probably the only company in the US that can deploy tens of thousands, potentially hundreds of thousands of tests a month with no additional delay. So we basically have limitless scale without adding any kind of delay to it. We just have to scale the lab operations in the middle. And that is a huge transformation. And what we saw is that, this kind of simple recipe of merging biotech with cloud and AI works not just in cancer detection or genetics, it works everywhere where we have either high throughput or complex data sets, and you have doctors involved in patients, and you need to have a seamless system. So it's pretty exciting. So right now we're doing a lot of movies. The big studios, Disney, Netflix, Comcast, NBC Universal, Paramount, they're all now really pulling the trigger on broad deployment of all their, or getting everything back online. So we are competing for contracts there that are very large, and it's very interesting and scary at the same time, because these are very complex logistical challenges if you have to test 50 movie sets across America. We develop mobile laboratories, also cloud connected. So it was definitely a very unusual challenge, and we kind of jumped into it. Now we are sucked into the whole COVID thing. It's strategically important for QuantGene because we have unique access to C-levels of very large Fortune 500 companies that we normally wouldn't have, and that gives us exposure to them also with our core product, which is the Serenity Cancer Detection and Genetics. So COVID is an enormous door opener. It's potentially a big cash flow generator, which helps us. But it's also a crazy Wild West panic thing where we have to really learn as a company to have big commercial operations, learn how not to lose money on complex projects. And so it's extremely exhausting, but also very exciting. And yeah, it's kind of this weird things where we first stood by and thought what's happening, and now we're in the middle of at the eye of the storm. So it's pretty exciting.
No, that's terrific. And yeah, speaking of order from chaos in the Wild West, Llewellyn, Mars Bios kind of, I think, dived in multiple ways around COVID, and would love to hear your thoughts on that, and sort of what does that look like 6 months ago, and now what does it look like going forward, maybe even as an investment strategy for Mars.
Yeah, it's been a really interesting year for sure from our point of view. So when everything really started hitting in February, we started really talking about what we were seeing and what we were starting to see in Italy and what was going on, and we knew that this was coming because it was clear that there was going to be no attempt to make any kind of genuine effort to stop COVID coming to the United States. And so we started focusing on this mid-late February, and we kind of pivoted for a while to just working on COVID stuff, whether or not it was an investment opportunity. Through that, we came across a bunch of very interesting startups, and we started trying to invest in people that were working on real actionable problems that they could solve right now. So we didn't get into a lot of stuff like vaccine development that some people were putting money into because we kind of felt the boat was probably already sailing. But some of the issues that we were seeing with PPE shortages and bottlenecks in supply chains and the testing issue were things where, we felt we could bring our expertise and try and, help bring some of these programs along. And I think one of the two things really came out of this. One, this was led from our point of view by our then venture partner, Joe Wilson, who has now spun off an entire venture fund of his own, Untitled Capital, based in Los Angeles and Los Feliz. And he's investing purely in those kind of companies that are working to solve the problems emergent from COVID. And the other one was really, I think, the story of how Los Angeles has developed over the last 6 years, because we were approached as we were reaching out and saying, hey, if you've got ideas, if you've got ways to help solve some of these problems, reach out to us. We were approached by a company called Curative, which is from the Bay Area, and they were a relatively small startup company, but they had license to an FDA-approved PCR COVID test. But they had absolutely no staff, no facility, and no means to scale. And so we made two phone calls. We introduced them to a company called Corva Labs, who were the first graduate of Lab Launch 3 years ago from Monrovia. They left us to set up what's called a CLIA lab, which is an FDA-designated testing laboratory in San Dimas, just up the road. We introduced Curative to Corva. They fell in love. Great things happened. And by midsummer, they'd done 2.5 million COVID tests, the majority of the state of California. And they're the guys who were providing, the actual tests if you have to go to Dodger Stadium or any of these big sites during late spring, summer. So that really is a true example of how really this emergent startup community was able to cross-connect, bring the right people together and make a real difference on the ground. So we're immensely proud of that. And so, there's a lot of work to go. I don't think big picture, COVID is going to change our investment philosophy. But I think as people have been saying, it's shone a bright light on biotechnology. It's shown why we're so important, and it's shown why we're right about so much stuff. And I think people who are thoughtful really see that. And I think that's really going to help us as we talk about bringing more investors who aren't in the biotech community into the biotech community. This is the kind of story we can tell them to say, hey, this is not only something that is a good investment, it's valuable and can really make a difference in society for the better.
Fabulous. That's great inspiration. I think there's, I'm looking forward to seeing the case studies that come out of that, Llewellyn, the whole, this entire 2020 and, in particular curative as a, as a story. But what you just mentioned, I think is really important. And as we think about the BCLA audience and really, what's driving that around career development and sort of understanding, how does one get into this industry? How does one build a career, whether it's more technical, scientific, or more on the business side? And so, would love just to get everyone's thoughts as we kind of go into the tail end of this around what should students be thinking about, looking for when they build their careers, whether it's around internships, whether it's around mentoring, whether it's around the right kind of networking. But what are the opportunities here in LA? And actually, Sue, I'm going to put you on the spot because I know you've built some amazing programs in Boston, and thinking about what can we learn from that to really jumpstart the industry here.
I heard so many interesting things from the panelists. I mean, some really, really great ideas. So first of all, I hope that students or people who are early career professionals listening to this heard that there's sort of there's the biomanufacturing and scaling aspect, and that's an interesting career pathway. I really was very taken with Joe talking about the convergent technologies, right? Which is, so if you're a tech person, an AI person, the convergence that's going on in the life sciences or together with the life sciences right now creates some very, very interesting pathways. So I think that internships are a really great way. If there are convenings that are done that bring entrepreneurs out and sort of willing to meet with students and talk about career opportunities, that's really a great way. And someone was talking about the fact that it's harder to make those collisions happen, where people get to really meet one another. And I know that's something that Bioscience LA is really going to be thinking about. So I think the major point is think about finding ways to go and spend some time working, especially in startup companies. I think that those are really great opportunities to learn, take advantage of internship programs that may be out there. And don't think of the life sciences as being particularly monolithic. There is room for professionals with lots and lots of different kinds of skills. So I think as a starting point, I would say that.
Fabulous. Basil, I know we've talked about your recruiting strategies over the years, and in particular, recruiting here in LA. So would love some thoughts from you on that.
Yeah, I think if you're going to focus on early career people right now and how you can be part of this LA ecosystem, I would say, view almost every job as a networking opportunity. As Sue mentioned, life sciences has a place for people of many different skills. You could be coming out of a business bachelor's degree and play an incredibly important role in a life sciences company, whether that's a startup or a big company. I think both offer the opportunity to broaden the scope of your skills and your awareness. In a startup, you've got to be jack of all trades. You can jump onto this team to help with some real estate project. Oh, we've got to manage, the rebuild out of our lab, or you could jump onto this team and help put a pitch book together for a big pharma visit because there's not enough hands. On the other hand, in a big company environment, you've got all these people that are subject matter experts in their little area, whether that's legal or biomanufacturing or target discovery on the research side. And you can engage with all of these different skill sets and broaden the scope of what you can offer to a future employer, because you will definitely not be doing the same thing 20 years from now that you're doing today. I think we got to encourage students to think of themselves as somebody that's going to be changing. I mean, my job, I might have the same title I did 23 years ago, but what I'm doing couldn't be more different. So that's what we're trying to encourage people to think of when whenever I speak to young people that are looking to get a start in the industry.
Joe, would love to hear your thoughts on both recruiting at your company, and especially recruiting as you've moved geographies, recruiting in the midst of pandemic, and then kind of what are you looking for in team members, and how can someone prepare in sort of more of the data-driven genomics diagnostics side of the world?
I think one of the most, or maybe the most important trait that we are looking for is always, I call it the pioneer trait. So I think a big mistake that people still commit is, I apply to a job and then I show you my CV. I think in a startup, we have all these amazing opportunities all over the place. And, structuring these jobs and saying, okay, we need someone here is kind of against my nature. I would rather prefer people approaching us and saying, you know what, I love what you're doing. I'm super passionate about that and the commercialization of the genetics product, or I'm very good at AI. I really want to work on something like that. That's a much better pitch than just applying for a job. So I think if I had one message to, folks who look for cool jobs and cool startups, just be a little pioneering and a little more conceptually strong on your side. So if someone approaches me with a very good pitch, what they can do for Quantgene, what they're really interested in doing, and I don't have a job opening, I would still hire the person. And I think that's important, right? Because especially disruptive companies like Quantgene, where we have an enormous market in front of us, but also have enormous things to do, we need people who take things in their own hands. And they can be young and junior if they're smart about it. So I think that's always my tip to everyone. Like, just do listen to some podcasts where we are on, or things we say, and learn a little bit about the company. And then don't just look for job posts, but also think what do you really want to do in your life? What skills do you bring in, and how does it match with anything at Quantgene? And then just pitch us. Kind of, in a way, it's very similar. It's a convergence between being an entrepreneur and being a great employee at a startup. Just pitch us what you want to do. So I think that's this interesting convergence between hiring becomes like reinvesting in people, and they pitch us what they want to do. The same way we pitch our company to investors. So, I think that it's a completely new mindset, but we actually had some people doing this with us, and they are some of our best team members.
Thank you. No, I've talked to some of those folks, Joe, and you've got a great team that's really starting to stretch the bounds of what the company is doing and what they can do, which is terrific. And then Llewellyn, I know you've been super involved with exactly this question with BCLA over a number of years, but new insights, especially in this in 2020 going forward, around how do you build your career and how do you find the right path into it.
I just want to agree with everything everyone said above. It's basically that. But I think, as you say, 2020, it's been a really long decade, and I think no matter how we've each been affected by the individual things that have been going on this year, I think this has really made a lot of people kind of really reevaluate what is genuinely important, and that might be just as true at the beginning of your career as it is for those in the middle. And I guess to steal the tagline from LARTA, which is a LA-based nonprofit, the purpose of biology is to feed, fuel, and heal the world. And that's an amazing opportunity for everything. And so I guess kind of just reiterating everyone else, I think more than ever, it's more important to really follow what you're passionate about, what really bothers you about the world, what isn't working for you, what makes you sad. Fix it, because biology is the best way to fix a lot of things that we have going on. There's a lot of opportunities, and in a city as vast and diverse as Los Angeles, there's going to be people working on all of these issues in the years ahead, and I'm excited to be a part of that, and I just look forward to seeing how it grows under the leadership of this generation watching this webinar, because us old folks are on the way out. This is your world now, and you've got to make it happen.
That's fabulous. Thank you. And, I was, as we're kind of winding down, I was going to ask everyone to sort of end with a sort of a challenge to the audience. And I feel like, I think everyone really, integrated that into this last set of comments about a real challenge, something we can learn. I'm going to throw something out that, thinking about growing team members, training, education, something that has been sort of one of my personal learnings the last 6 months, which relates to my kids. And we've got a 10-year-old and a 6-year-old, and I've watched my kids learn in different ways over the past several months. And, it's been funny, it's been painful, it's been, entertaining, sometimes frustrating. But I think, what I've learned from that, which I think we can all take into the workplace, whether you're early career or later career, is really to understand who's around you and kind of look through the world, or look at the world through, through their lenses, and understand kind of what they're seeing and what they're experiencing. And I think LA, back to the point about, what can we do differently in LA? We have this tremendous diversity from a population standpoint and an academic standpoint. And, we're going to be working with some amazing people in our own industry, in other industries. And I think there's just a lot to be learned here that we can take to move life sciences forward, to feed, fuel, and heal, as Llewellyn said, and really move things forward. And, we a lot of us started 2020 saying that, this is the decade of Los Angeles. And everyone knows I've said this, we got the Olympics coming in 8 years. And I think they're still coming in 8 years. Presumably we'll be back outside and living a more normal life in 8 years. But, we are at the beginning of a lot of great things right now. And so 2020 is an interesting, I don't know if it's a speed bump or a detour, or just an interesting set of challenges and new information that we're getting. But I'm really excited for the opportunities for the next generation, as Llewellyn said. And so I think there's huge opportunities here from a Bioscience LA standpoint. We are really excited to be working with BCLA, working with the community, working with all of the colleges and independent research institutions, the smaller companies, the growing companies, the investors. And so started some very big things here. And so I want to thank everyone here. I want to thank BCLA for having us. I want to thank Basil and Joe and Llewellyn, and especially Sue for spending the time. It's been a great discussion. And I think that all of us are very reachable for questions from BCLA. So hopefully this is not the last time anyone at BCLA sees us. So thank you so much for the time.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. That was a pleasure. Very interesting discussion.
Very interesting discussion.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. It was a very, very interesting and inspiring discussion, I think, especially for everyone in our generation. Really difficult topics, but also, a lot of space to find new solutions. So with that, I want to thank everyone. Thank you, Dave. Thank you to all of our panelists, Llewellyn, Basil, Joe, Susan, and also to all of our attendees. I hope that you enjoyed this talk, and we look forward to seeing you at events in the future.
Perfect. Thank you all.